Now, the diversity in the living world. तो Ncert कहता है कि biology the science of the life forms and the living process. The living world combines an amazing diversity of the living organism. Early man could easily perceive the difference between the inanimate and matter and the living organism. Early man divided some of the inanimate matter, wind, sea, fire, etc., and some among the animals and the plants. A common feature of all such forms of the inanimate and the animate object by the sense of awe of the fear that they evoke. The description of the living organism, including human being, began much later in the human history. Societies which indulged in the anthropocentric view of the biology could register limited progress in the biological knowledge. Systematic and the monumental description of the life forms brought in out of the necessity detailed system of the identification, nomenclature, and the classification. The biggest spin of each study by the recognition of the sharing of the similarities among the living organisms both horizontally and vertically. That all present day living organisms are related to each other and also to the all organisms that ever existed on the earth. By a revelation which humbled man and led to the cultural movement for the conservation of the biodiversity. In the following chapter of this unit, we will get a description including classification of the animals and the plants from a taxonomic perspective. तो यहाँ पर अर्नेस्ट मेयर के बारे में दिया हुआ है कि बॉर्न ऑन द 5 जुलाई 1904 इन द कैम्पटन जर्मनी अर्नेस्ट मेयर द हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी evolutionary biologist who was being called the Darwin of the 20th century was one of the 100 greatest scientists of the all time. Mayer joined Harvard Faculty of the Arts and Sciences in the 1953 and retired in the 1955, assuming the title Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology Emeritus. Throughout his 80-year career, his research expanded ornithology, taxonomy, geography, evolution, systematics, and the history and the philosophy of the biology. He almost single-handedly made the origin of the species diversity the central question of evolutionary biology that it is today. He also pioneered the currently accepted definition of the biological species. Mayer was awarded the three prizes widely regarded as the triple crown of the biology: the Baljan Prize in 1983, the International Prize for the Biology in the 1994, and the Craftwood Prize in the 1999. Mayer died at the age of 4 in the year 2004. फिर आता है द लिविंग वर्ल्ड. How wonderful is the living world! The wide range of the living type is amazing. The extraordinary habitat in which we find living organisms, be it cold mountains, deciduous forest, ocean, freshwater lakes, deserts, or the hot spring, leaves us speechless. The beauty of the galloping horse of the migrating birds, the valley of the flowers or the attacking sharks evokes awe and a deep sense of the wonder. The ecological conflict and the cooperation among the members of the population and among population of a community, or even the molecular traffic inside a cell, make us deeply reflect on what indeed is the life. This question had two implicit questions within it. The first is a technical one and fixed answer to what living is as opposed to the non-living, and the second is a philosophical one and fixed answer to what the purpose of the life is. As scientists, we shall not attempt answering the second question before try reflecting on what is living. फिर उसके बाद फिर आता है व्हाट इज लिविंग. व्हेन वी ट्राई टू डिफाइन द लिविंग वी कन्वेंशनली लुक फॉर द डिस्टिंक्टिव कैरेक्टरिस्टिक exhibited by the living organism. Growth, reproduction, ability to sense the environment and mount a suitable response come to our mind immediately as a unique feature of the living organism. One can add a few more features like the metabolism, ability to self-replicate and self-organize, interact, and emergence of this list. Let us try to understand each of these. All living organisms grow, increase in the mass and increase in the number of the individuals are twin characteristics of the growth. A multicellular grows by the cell division. In plants, this growth by the cell division occurs continuously throughout their lifespan. In animals, this growth is seen only up to a certain age. However, cell division occurs in a certain issue to replace the lost cell. Unicellular organisms grow by the cell division. One can easily observe this in the in vitro culture by simply counting the number of the cells under the microscope. In majority of the higher animals and the plants, growth and the reproduction are mutually exclusive events. One must remember that the increase in the body mass is considered as the growth. Non-living objects also grow if we take increase in the body mass as a criteria for the growth. Mountains, boulders, and sand mounds do grow. However, this kind of growth exhibited by the non-living object is by the accumulation of the material on the surface. In living organism, growth is from the inside. Growth, therefore, cannot be taken as the defining property of the living organism. Conditions under which it can be observed in all living organisms have to be explained, and then we understand what is the characteristic of the living organism. A dead organism does not grow. Reproduction likewise is a characteristic of the living organism. In the multicellular organism, reproduction refers to the production of the progeny possessing features more or less similar to those of the parent. Invariably and implicitly, we refer to the sexual reproduction. Organisms reproduce by the asexual means. Also, fungi multiply and spread easily due to millions of the asexual spores they produce. In lower organisms like the yeast and the hydra, we observe budding. In planaria flatworms, we observe the true regeneration, that means fragmented organism regenerates the lost part of its body and becomes a new organism. The fungi, the filamentous algae, the protonema of the moss all easily multiply by the fragmentation. When it comes to the unicellular organism like the bacteria, unicellular algae or the amoeba, reproduction is synonymous with the growth, that means increase in the number of the cells. We have already defined growth as the equivalent to increase in the cell number or mass. Hence we notice that single-celled organisms we are not very clear about the usage of these two terms, growth and the reproduction. Further, there are many organisms which do not reproduce: mules, sterile, worker bee, infertile couples, etc. Hence reproduction cannot be an all-inclusive in defining characteristic of the living organisms. Of course, no non-living object is capable of reproducing or replicating by itself. Another characteristic of the life is the metabolism. All living organisms are made of the chemicals. These chemicals, are small and the big, belong to the various classes, size, function, etc., are constantly being made and changed into some other biomolecules. These conversions are the chemical reactions or the metabolic reactions. There are thousands of the metabolic reactions occurring simultaneously inside all living organisms, be they be they unicellular or the multicellular. All plants, animals, fungi, and microbes exhibit metabolism. The sum total of the chemical reactions occurring in our body is the metabolism. No non-living objects exhibits the metabolism. Metabolic reactions can be demonstrated outside the body in the cell-free system, and isolated metabolic reactions outside the body of an organism. Performative too is neither living nor non-living. Hence, while metabolism is a defining feature of the all living organism, without exception, isolated metabolic reactions in vitro are not living things but purely living reactions. Hence, the cellular organization of the body is the defining feature of the life forms. Perhaps the most obvious and technically complicated feature of all a living organism is the ability to sense the surrounding or the environment and respond to the environmental stimuli, which could be physical, chemical, or the biological. We sense our environment through our sense organ. Plants respond to the external factors like light, water, temperature, other organisms, pollutants, etc. All organisms from the prokaryotes, the most complex eukaryotes, can sense and respond to the environmental cues. Photoperiod affects the reproduction in the female breeders, both plants and animals. All organisms handle chemicals entering their bodies. All organisms are therefore aware of their surrounding. Human beings is the only organism who is aware of himself, has the self-consciousness. Consciousness therefore becomes the defining property of the living organism. When it comes to the human beings, it is all the more difficult to define the living state. We observe patients lying in the coma in the hospital and virtually supported by the machines which replace the heart and the lungs. The patient is otherwise brain dead. The patient has no self-consciousness. Are such patients who never come back to the normal life, living or the non-living. In the higher classes, you will come to know about all living phenomena are due to the underlying interactions. The property of the tissue are not present in the constituent cells but arise as a result of the interaction among the constituent cells. Similarly, the property of the cellular organelles are not present in the molecular constituent of the organelle but arise as a result of the interaction among the molecular components arising the compromising the organelle. The interaction results in the emergent property at a higher level of the organization. This phenomena is true in the hierarchy of the organizational complexity at all levels. Therefore, we can say that living organisms are self-replicating, evolving, and self-regulating interactive systems capable of responding to the external stimuli. Biology is the story of the life on the earth. Biology is the story of the evolution of the living organism on the earth. All living organisms, present, past, and the future, are linked to one another by the sharing of the common genetic material, but to the varying degrees. इसके बाद फिर आता है डाइवर्सिटी इन द लिविंग वर्ल्ड. If you look around, you will see a large variety of the living organism, be it the potted plant, insect, birds, your pets, or the other animals and the plants. There, there are also several organisms that you cannot see with your naked eye, but they are all around you. If you were to increase an area that you make observation in, the range and the variety of the organisms that you see would increase. Obviously, if you were to visit a dense forest, you would probably see a much greater number and the kinds of the living organism in it. Each different kind of the plant, animals, and the organism that you see represents a species. The number of the species that are known and described range between 1.7 to 1.8 million. This refers to the biodiversity or the number and the types of the organism present on the earth. We would remember here that we explore new areas and evolve, and even old ones, new organisms are continuously being identified. As stated earlier, there are millions of the plants and animals in the world. We know the plants and animals in our own area by their local names. These local names would vary from place to place, even within a country. Probably you would recognize the confusion that would be created if we did not find any base means to talk to each other to refer to the organism we are talking about. Hence, there is a need to understand and standardize the naming of the living organism such that a particular organism is known by the same name all over the world. This process is called a nomenclature. Obviously, nomenclature or the naming is only possible when the organism is described correctly and we know to what organism the name is attached to. This is identification. In order to facilitate the study, number of the scientists have established a procedure to assign a scientific name to each known organism. This is acceptable to the biologists all over the world. For plants, scientific names are based on all agreed principles and the criteria which are provided in the International Code for the Botanical Nomenclature (ICBN). You may ask how animals named. Animals taxonomists have evolved international code for the geological nomenclature (ICJN). The scientific names ensure that each organism has only the name has only one name. Description of any organism could enable the people in any part of the world to arrive at the same name. They also ensure that such a name has not been used for any other known organism. Biologists follow universally accepted principles to provide the scientific names to the known organism. Each name has two components, the generic name and the specific epithet. This system of providing a name when the two components is called the binomial nomenclature. Then this naming given by the Carlos Linnaeus is being practiced by the biologists all over the world. This naming is using a two-word format was found convenient. Let us take the example of the mango to understand the base of the providing scientific names later. The scientific name of the mango is written as the Mangifera indica. Let us now see how it is a binomial name. In this, Mangifera represents the genus, while indica is a particular species or a specific epithet. Other universal rules of the nomenclature are as follows. Biological names are written generally written in Latin and written in the italics. They are Latinized or derived from the Latin irrespective of their origin. The first word is a biological name representing the genus, while the second component denotes the specific epithet. Both the words in the biological name, when handwritten, are separately underlined or printed in italics to indicate their Latin origin. The first word denoting the genus starts with a capital letter, while the specific epithet starts with a small letter. It can be illustrated with the help of the examples of the Mangifera indica. Name of the author appears after the specific epithet, that means at the end of the biological name, and is written in an abbreviated form, that means Mangifera indica Lin. It indicates that this species was first discovered by the Linnaeus. Since it is nearly impossible to study all the living organisms, it is necessary to devise some means to make this possible. This process is classification. Classification is the process by which anything is grouped into convenient category based on some easily observable characters. For example, we easily recognize groups such as the plants or the animals or the dogs or the cats or the insects. The moment we see any of these terms, we associate certain characters with the organism in that group. What image do you see when you think of the dog? Obviously, each one of us will see dogs and not cats. Now, if we are to think of the Alsatians, we know what we are talking about. Similarly, suppose we were to see mammals, you would of course think of the animals with the external ears and the body hairs. Likewise, in the plants, if we try to talk of the wheat, the picture in each of our mind will be of the wheat plants, not of the rice or any other plant. Hence, all the dogs, cats, mammals, wheat, rice, plants, animals, etc., are convenient category be used to study organism. The scientific term for these category, the taxa. Here you must recognize that taxa can indicate category at very different levels. Plant also form a taxa. Wheat is also a taxa. Similarly, animals, mammals, dogs are all taxa. But you know that a dog is a mammal and mammals are the animals. Therefore, animals, mammals, and the dogs represent the taxa at the different levels. Ncert कहता है कि hence based on the characteristic all living organisms can be classified into different taxa. This process of the classification is a taxonomy. External and internal structure along with the structure of the cell development processes and the ecological information of the organism are essential and form the basis of the modern taxonomic studies. Hence, the characterization, identification, classification, and nomenclature are the processes that are basic to the taxonomy. Taxonomy is not something new. Human beings have been always been interested in knowing more and more about the various kinds of the organisms, particularly with reference to their own use. In early days, human beings needed to find sources for their basic needs of the food, clothing, and the shelter. Hence, the earliest classifications were based on the dose of the various organisms. Human beings were since long not only interested in knowing more about different kinds of the organism and their diversity, but also the relationship among them. The branch of the study was referred to as the systematics. The word systematic is derived from the Latin word systema, which means systematic arrangement of the organism. Linnaeus viewed the Systema Naturae as the title of this publication. The scope of the systematics was later enlarged to include identification, nomenclature, and the classification. Systematic takes place into account evolutionary relationship between the organism. फिर आता है taxonomic categories. Classification is not a single step process but involves hierarchy of the steps in which each step represents a rank or the hierarchy category. Since the category is a part of overall taxonomic arrangement, it is called the taxonomic category, and all the categories together constitute the taxonomic hierarchy. Each category referred to as the unit of the classification in fact depends on rank and the commonly termed as the taxon, polar taxa. Taxonomic category and the hierarchy can be illustrated by an example. Insects represent a group of the organisms sharing common features like their three pairs of the jointed legs. It means insects are the recognizable concrete objects which can be classified and thus were given a rank or the category. Can you name other such groups for the organism? Remember, groups represent the category. Category further denote rank. Each rank or the taxon is a present unit of the classification. These taxonomic group categories are distinct biological entities and not merely morphological aggregates. Taxonomical study of all known organisms have led to the development of the common categories such as the kingdom, phylum or the division for the plants, class, order, family, genus and the species. All organisms including those in the plant and animals kingdom have a species as the lowest category. Now the question you may ask is how to place an organism in the various categories. The basic requirement is the knowledge of the character of an individual or a group of the organism. This helps in identifying similarity and dissimilarity among the individuals of the same kind of the organism as well as the other kinds of the organism. Now the species. Taxonomic study is considered a group of the individual organism with the fundamental similarity as the species. One should be able to distinguish one species from the other closely related species based on their distinct morphological differences. Let us consider Mangifera indica, Solanum, tuberosum, Panthera, Leo. All the three names indica, tuberosum and Leo represent specific epithets, while the first one, Mangifera, Solanum and the Panthera are the genera and represents another higher level of the taxon or the category. Each genus may have one or more than one specific epithet representing different organisms but having morphological similarities. For example, Panthera has another specific epithet called the tigris, and Solanum includes the species like the nigrum and Melogenea. Human beings belong to the species Sapiens, which is grouped the name Homo, genus Homo. The scientific name therefore the human being written as the Homo sapiens. इसके बाद फिर आता है जीनस. Genus comprise a group of the related species which has more characters in the common compared to the species of the other genera. We can say that genera are aggregates of the closely related species. For example, potato and the brinjal are two different species but belong to the genus Solanum. Lion, Panthera, leopard, Panthera pardus, and the tiger Panthera Panthera tigris with several common features are all species of the genus Panthera. This genus differs from the another genus Felis which includes the cats. फिर आता है द नेक्स्ट कैटेगरी फैमिली हैज a group of the related genera with a still less number of the similarities as compared to the genus and the species. Families are characterized on the basis of the both vegetative and the reproductive feature of the plant species. Among the plants, for example, three different genera, Solanum, Petunia, and the Dhatura are placed in the family Solanaceae. Among animals, for example, genus Panthera comprising lion, tiger, leopard is put along with the genus Felis cats in the family Felidae. Similarly, if you observe the feature of a cat and a dog, you will find some similarity and some differences as well. They are separated into different families, Felidae and the Canidae respectively. इसके बाद फिर आता है order. You have been seen earlier that category like the genus, species, genus and the family are based on the number of the similar characters. Generally, orders and the other higher taxonomic categories are identified based on the aggregates of the characters. Order being a higher category is the family of the family which includes a few similar characters. The similar characters are less in the number as compared to the different genera included in a family. Plant species like the Convolvulaceae, Solanaceae are included in the order. Polymonols mainly based on the floral characters. The animals order Carnivora include family like the Felidae and the Canidae. Strata class, this category includes related orders. For example, order Primata comprising monkey, gorilla and the gibbon is placed in the class Mammalia along with the other carnivora that includes animals like the tiger, cat and the dog. Class Mammalia has the other orders also. फिर आता है फाइलम, क्लास comprising animals like the fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds along with the mammals in constitute the next higher category called the phylum. All these based on the common features like the presence of the notochord and the dorso-hollow neural system are included in the phylum Chordata. In the case of the plants, classes with a few similar characters are assigned to a higher category called the division. फिर आता है किंगडम, तो ऑल ऑर्गेनिजम्स बिलोंग टू द वेरियस फाइलम आर assigned to the highest category called the kingdom Animalia in the classification of system of the animals. The kingdom Plantae, on the other hand, is a distinct and comprises all the plants from the various divisions. Henceforth, we will refer to these two groups as animals and the plant kingdoms. The taxonomic category from the species to the kingdom have been shown in the ascending order, starting with the species. These are broad categories, however, taxonomists have also developed subcategories in this hierarchy to facilitate more sound and scientific placement of the various taxa. Look at the hierarchy in the figure 1.1. Can you recall the basis of the arrangement? Say, for example, as we go higher from the species to the kingdom, the number of the common characteristics goes in decreasing. Lower the taxa, more are the characteristics that the members within the taxon share. Higher the category, the greater the difficulty of the determining relationship to the other taxa at the same level. Hence, the problem of the classification becomes more complex. Table 1.1 indicates the taxonomic category to which the some common organisms like horsefly, man, mango and the beet belong. तो यहाँ पर दिया हुआ है किंगडम दिया हुआ है, सबसे नीचे है स्पीशीज, उसके बाद फिर जीनस, फैमिली, ऑर्डर, क्लास, फाइलम और द डिवीजन, फिर किंगडम, यानी कीप पॉट क्लीन और फैमिली गेट सिक. तो ये दिया हुआ है टैक्सोनॉमिक कैटेगरीज शोइंग द हायरार्किकल अरेंजमेंट इन द असेंडिंग ऑर्डर में. उसके बाद फिर आता है कि ऑर्गेनिज्म विथ दी टैक्सोनॉमिक कैटेगरी दिया हुआ है. तो जैसे मैन का होमोसैपियंस, फिर होमो, होमिनिडियाई, प्राइमेटा, एनिमलिया और कॉर्डेटा. हाउस फ्लाई का मस्का डोमेस्टिका, मस्का, मफिडियाई, डिप्टेरा, इंसेक्टा, ऑर्थोपोडा. मैंगो का मैंजोफेरा निंडिका, मैग्निफेरा, एनाकार्डियसेई, सैपिंडल्स, डाइकोटिलिडाई और एंजियोस्पर्मेई. बीट का ट्रिटिकम एस्टिवम, ट्रिटिकम पुआसेई, फोयल्स, मोनोकोटिलाई और दी एंजियोस्पर्मेई. फिर आता है टैक्सोनॉमिकल एड्स. तो टैक्सोनॉमिक स्टडी ऑफ द वेरियस species of the plant species and the other organisms are useful in agriculture, forestry industry and in general in knowing our bioresources and their diversity. These studies would require correct classification and identification of the organism. Identification of the organism required intensive laboratory and the field study. The collection of the actual specimen of the plant and the animal species is essential and is the primary source of the taxonomic study. They are also fundamental to the study and essential for the training to the systematics. It is used for the classification of an organism and the information gathered is also sorted along with the specimen. In some cases, the specimen is preserved for the further use of studies. Biologists have established certain procedures and techniques to store and preserve the information as well as the specimen. Some of these are explained to help you understand the usage of these aids. फिर आता है herbarium. Herbarium is a storehouse of the collected plant specimens that are dried, preserved and preserved on the sheets. Further, these sheets are arranged according to the universally accepted system of the classification. These specimens along with their description on the herbarium sheets become a storehouse of the repository for the future use. The herbarium sheets also carry a label providing information about the date and the place of the collection, English, local and the botanical name, family, collector's name, etc. Herbaria also serve as a quick reference system in the taxonomical studies. तो herbarium showing the stored specimen इस तरह से दिखाए हुए हैं. फिर आता है botanical gardens. So these specialized gardens have collection of the living plants for the reference. Plant species in these gardens are grown for the identification purpose and each plant is labeled indicating its botanical scientific name and its family. The famous botanical gardens are at the Kew, England, Indian Botanical Garden, Havra and at National Botanical Research Institute, Lucknow, India. फिर आता है म्यूजियम. बायोलॉजिकल म्यूजियम्स आर जनरली सेट अप इन द एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूट सच एज द स्कूल्स एंड द कॉलेज. Museums have collections of the preserved plant and animal specimen for the study and the reference. Specimens are preserved in the containers or the jars in the preservative solutions. Plants and animal specimen may also be preserved in the dry specimen. Insects are preserved in the insect box after collecting, killing and the pinning. Larger animals like the birds and the mammals are usually stuffed and preserved. Museums often have collections for the skeletons of the animals too. फिर आता है zoological parks. These are the places where wild animals are kept in protected environments under the human care, which enable us to learn about their food habits and behavior. All animals in the zoo are provided as far as possible the conditions similar to the natural habitats. Children are living these visiting parks commonly called as the zoo. फिर आता है key. तो Key is another taxonomical aid used for the identification of the plants and the animals based on the similarity and the dissimilarity. They are based on the contrasting characters, generally in a pair called the couplet. It represents the choice made between the two opposite options. This results in the acceptance of only one and the rejection of the other. Each statement in the key is called the lead. Separate taxonomic keys are required for each taxonomic category, such as the family, genus, and species. For the identification purpose, keys are generally analytical in the nature. फिर आता है फ्लोरा मैनुअल्स मोनोग्राफ कैटलॉग्स और some other means of the recording and description. They also help in the correct identification. Flora contains the actual amount of the habitat and distribution of the plants of a given area. These provide the index of the plant species found in a particular area. Manuals are useful in providing information for identification of the names of the species found in an area. Monographs contain the information of any one taxon. So summary: the living world is a rich variety. Millions of the species and the plants have been identified and described, but a large number of still remains unknown. The very range of the organism in the terms of the size, color, habitat, physiological and the morphological feature make us seek the defining characteristic of the living organism. In order to facilitate the study of the kinds and the diversity of the organism, biologists have evolved certain rules and principles for the identification, nomenclature, and the classification of the organism. The branch of the knowledge dealing with these aspects we refer to as taxonomy. The taxonomic study of the various species of the plants and the animals are useful in the agriculture, forestry, industry, and in general for knowing our bioresources and their diversity. The basics of the taxonomy, like the identification, naming, and the classification of organisms, are universally evolved under the international codes based on the resemblance and the distinct feature. Each organism is identified and assigned a correct scientific biological name and comprising two birds as per the binomial system of the nomenclature. An organism represents occupies a place for the position in the system of the classification. There are many category ranks and are generally referred to as the taxonomic categories or the taxa. All the categories constitute a taxonomic hierarchy. Taxonomists have developed a variety of the taxonomic aids to facilitate identification, naming, and the classification of the organism. These studies are carried out from the actual specimens which are collected from the field and preserved at the referral in the form of the herbarium, museum, and in the botanical gardens and the zoological park. It requires special technique for the collection and preservation of the specimen in the herbaria and the museum. Live specimens, on the other hand, of the plants and the animals are found in the botanical gardens or the zoological parks. Taxonomists also prepare and disseminate information through the manuals and the monographs for the further taxonomic studies. Taxonomic keys are tools that help in the identification based on the characteristics.